Welcome to the fish tank.
Hey everybody, Fishman here for the second part of my 20-year framing video, which will be the installation of the parts we built in part A, and we'll be installing those parts on this 175 gallon, well, soon to be reef tank, which is part of my video series for the complete build. Now this is the next day, so again I had to cut the video in half because my video editor wouldn't go through the whole thing at this one time, so let's get on to the second part. Alright, so we moved on to the next day, and it's time to put the framing all in place. First I'll start off with the bottom brackets here. 8 of these go on, so I'll only show you I think the first 2, actually maybe a little bit of another one. What I'm going to do here first is put on a piece of tape. I think shortly I'm going to switch into fast forward as well, because I think it was the second one showed a better angles for how the screws go in. The most important parts are first the angle of the screws as they go in, and also the buffer of silicone, which will fill that gap that you see I'm making right there now between the glass and the aluminum. So what I'm going to do here is first I think I'm going to demonstrate the countersink of the holes one more time. Yeah, here we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a very generous bead of silicone on the part of the aluminum that's going to come fill that gap that's up there near the top. I do use a lot of silicone, and often a lot of it gets wasted, but in this particular case this is actually quite necessary. So let's see, yep, there's the bead, marginally in focus too. I'm going to squish that into place, and as you can see it just fills that whole thing completely. And once that cures, it supplies a great deal of support. And then I think I'm going to actually, after this is when it switches over to fast forward, I think. The reason why I call this 20-year framing is because about 20 years ago, I'm not sure exactly because 20 years is a long time, I sat down with an engineer and we designed how to frame and build aquariums. And the end result is what you see here now. In that time, since I started using this, I haven't had any leaks, and the way it was designed from basically how he described it was either the silicone that's holding the tank together, which you see here, or the framing, which is being bolted on the outside now, are strong enough to hold the tank together. And the combination obviously is doubled it up. And you can buy an aquarium in an aquarium store. Basically you have is glass, and usually the glass is thinner than this. Rarely is it all tempered, and so basically the tank's sufficiently strong enough on its own, because they sell tanks and they're not going to sell it, they're all going to break. But I would like to sleep really well at night, so with the added security of this extra framing, the likelihood of a leak is well, negligible. Now, as I said before, I'm showing you how this side here shows the screws going in better. You can see there's a slight downward angle on this, and I will seat the screw in, and I do this by hand because I don't want to basically strip a whole hole out and then have it doing nothing. And with a slight downward angle, you don't have any risk of the screw coming in contact with glass, because these are steel screws after all. And I think 2 of those is enough, so we'll switch back into fast forward. And speed drilling. And after I'm done this, I just smear the silicone at the top with a finger and remove the tape. I want to show that you can do this with the drill as well. Unfortunately, it all turned out to be out of focus, but as with when I was doing the initial stand build, I put them in with the drill and then do the final tightening by hand to make sure that they're all actually doing something, and then I smear the silicone and remove the tape to give you a nice clean bead. There you go, all done. Now it's time to move on to putting the frame on the top of the tank. So what we need to do here is put those spacers that I cut, and I decided in the end, well, I didn't show it to you, but I chose which thickness to use, and then I'm only going with 4 of them. It turns out that the rest aren't really necessary. When I put the tape on, I'm just making sure that it doesn't come in contact with any of the inside parts, because I want to be able to well, remove it without taking any of the silicone out, or having the piece get stuck in the silicone and having to work it out. And again, I've switched over to fast forward. What I'm doing here is just covering all the bolts initially with a generous amount of silicone, because like I said, I don't want any steel coming in contact with glass. Aluminum's not so bad, but steel is definitely a no-no. And then I'm putting a bead on the inside from one end to the other, nice generous bead at that, so that it will be a gap between the glass and the aluminum. Well, apparently I ran out of silicone and I had to get a new tube. And I'm just double checking all the bolts, making sure they're all good and covered. Now the reason for putting a lot of generous silicone on the bolts, even though they're stainless steel bolts. Sorry, I just realized that, hey, I haven't flipped the view screen on the camera around, so I couldn't see if I was actually on in focus or anything. So I'm going to move back over here to the middle. And this is not going to be fast forward, because this is the critical part. I have to lift this up nice and evenly, not smearing any silicone on myself, and I'm going to try doing this while checking the checking where everything is in the frame. And then actually I can ignore that, because the most important part here right now is making sure this goes on without smearing the bead on the side, which is vertical at this point, and then placing it down and then putting pressure on with my thumbs, as you can see there, and moving it over as much as I can, and then sliding it down and then releasing the pressure and letting it just come down by gravity. Now those spacers will prevent the silicone from getting squished out around the bolts, but I'm going to double check here with one of the spare spacers I have to make sure that I got a good gap still and everything's good. And then I'm going to make sure that the frame is centered over the tank, which it was off by a bit, so I'm going to slide it towards the camera, and then we're good. Just going to double check everything, at which point I get my big head in the way and screw up the focus of the camera, so all that was out of focus. And then it doesn't matter, because there wasn't really anything to it. And as you can see, I've switched over to fast forward again. I'm just using my finger here to clean out the excess silicone and smear everything in place. It looks relatively neat. All that's going to be above the water line, so it won't be visible at all. I mean, actually everything you see here is beyond, well, not in view. This is just a close-up of a couple of the, well, first off the bracket, and also for the framing there. And here's the final view of everything after it's all done. This is pretty much the end of the framing. This needs to obviously cure for a while, because all that silicone needs to be nice and hard before I do the fill. So this is the first actual break I've gotten in building this, even though you guys have, what, 3 weeks? I think this is the 3rd week since I started posting these. This is actually like 3 days, 4 days now, but I get a nice break because this has to cure for a few weeks before I can fill the tank. And just before the fill, I'll finally do the installation of the filtration system, which started off with a DIY leak-proof canister filter. And you'll finally get to see me install that and put the media in, obviously just before I fill the tank, so that I don't lose any of the curing of the media that's been, well, basically going on since I started this. What you're seeing here is the next day. I've just removed the spacers, and I'm just filling that little gap of silicone that's created from where the spacer was, and I'm also going to smear silicone on all those exposed bolts on the top. So that's it for the 20-year framing video. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one where I install the filter. Thanks. Hey everybody, thank you for watching my video. If you liked it, please slap a like below, or if you want to see more of this type of video or some of my other work, please subscribe to my channel. And I will see you there. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.